Alright YouTube, it's time for the Occult, video 83 on Moloch, Kek, Nergal, Memetic, Cultism in general, all of these things. I know I made a video about Memetics already within this playlist, but I wanted to refine the topic a little bit more with respect to certain specific sort of inclusions within the last few years. We all remember Ebola-chan, the cute, anthropic, overtly sexualized anime character used to sort of profess an awareness of and an appreciation for the Ebola epidemic, which struck many people as quite odd. It was very funny to see people's reactions. Even people that normally are into that sort of thing thought, well, it's gone a little bit beyond the realm of sense at this moment. I think the concept of Kek as related to the sad frog or Pepe meme really is basically the same, only longer lasting because it represents something a little bit beyond just a specific epidemic, really. That was sort of the first test of this capability, to see if basically the paganistic occult elements there, which is exactly what they were, could spread in a viral manner, much like the epidemic itself, and perhaps influence the way people behave, drive them mad, cause them to become like zealots or something, and then go forth and perpetuate it. With Kek, though, this is an actual Egyptian deity. It is an actual sort of frog deity, and people have noticed, I think, that there is additionally a very similar looking frog identified with a certain demon from within the Ars Gotia, from the Pseudomonarchia Daimonium sort of illustrations. I can't remember whether it was Beelzebub or Astaroth, which one it was. I think it was Astaroth, but I'm not exactly sure. The triple-headed sort of king of hell, with a man's head and then the head of a cat, the head of a frog, sort of waddling around on a toad body. It's very strange imagery. But people noticed the similarity. Then they noticed that Kek was an actual deity from Egyptian times. Maybe not one of the foremost deities, but at the same time part of these pantheons. And so naturally that proliferated, and still is being proliferated much more viciously than Ebola-chan ever was, which is good to see. People need to realize it's real occult imagery. It doesn't matter if you're presenting it in the form of a cartoon. You think that people back then, when they were carving it into rocks or pieces of clay, wouldn't have enjoyed the same ease of use with which people on the internet today can spread such things around, print them out, turn them into stickers or whatever? Of course they would. They simply didn't have the mechanical and technological means to do so. Otherwise, they probably would have put images of their deities on absolutely everything, both as a potential curse against enemies, get the blessing of the god, or whatever. As far as Moloch goes, that's usually identified with sort of the New World Order or Illuminati sort of side of it. The idea that they sacrifice things to Moloch at Bohemian Grove or something like that. I don't happen to agree with that assessment. Moloch, of course, is spoken of a great deal. If there are any like witch cults or dark magic users, Moloch is probably not the specific deity that they're using. Maybe Baal, in the singular, the proper sense, as opposed to sort of the term used for regional deities, little pagan idols that sort of every little city-state at the time had. It becomes confusing because there's a Baal, B-A-A-L, little b as in, well, that's sort of the pagan totem that this town or this village uses. And then there's Baal, big B, A-A-L, which is sort of a singular deity of sorts identified by Judeo-Christians as a demon. As far as Nergal goes, Nergal was more identified as the actual sort of deity connected to the Ebola epidemic. Zika, as well as a much larger pandemic which is quickly spreading, is identified sort of with the same deity. Anytime that inflicted, especially disease-related death is involved, Nergal would be the most proper deity to use for that within a pagan sense. Not an Abrahamist demon, not any other random, like, Lord of Destruction, but specifically inflicted death by sickness, inflicted death by disease, by epidemic, by plague, whatever, by dry rot on your organs or something. It would be Nergal, and I don't mean Nergal in the modern sense as a gaming character. N-U-R-G-L-E. I mean Nergal, N-E-R-G-A-L, which is an authentic, again, deity, the same as Kek, the same as Moloch, potentially the same as Baal, or any of these other things. So people are attempting to perpetuate images of these deities or related to these deities, especially within a specifically occult setting, specifically to frighten others in many cases, or because they believe that it has memetic power. I happen to agree with them on that, because it affects human consciousness. Anytime that human consciousness is affected, actions are then affected. And when actions are affected, for good or for ill, for whatever purpose or another, it does have an effect upon the real world at large. You think of chaos theory, the idea a butterfly flaps its wings in Peking, and in Central Park you get rain instead of sunshine. In a roundabout, way, that may be a more extreme example, but at the same time, long-term within a system in which you have such convolutions, it would actually be true. So yes, memetics does work, in a way. These beings were worshipped quite literally by ancient people as literal physical beings, or as ethereal, sort of detached cosmic entities. The idea that there's any more validity to, like, a Christian prayer or a ritual within Kabbalah or an Islamic sermon or something, then there is validity in these ancient pagan practices, regardless of how authentic the ritualism may be. It shouldn't even be a consideration for people who are involved with such things. You'd think the modern form of a Christian prayer, it's not being spoken in the same language and you're not saying the same thing as a Christian 1,000 years ago. That's not authentic either. And yet people claim that has power, and yet these pagan sort of beings or cosmic entities don't. I happen to disagree. Then it simply boils down to semantics, and it simply boils down to your opinion on which beings, if any, are real or not. I will point out, for those that are still Abrahamists and tend to frown upon or be questioning whether these things are real, the original Christian movement as well as the original Jewish movement were henotheists, not monotheists. That is, they had one being that they worshipped, but they believed in a great many spiritual forces. The postmodern secular application of I don't believe in any of these other deities, only our one kind of detached male anthropic entity is real. That's really postmodernism. That's just an interpretation of these scriptures that never held any weight in primordial Christianity, and certainly doesn't even to this day in many forms of Judaism. They would still believe in what the Islamists would call jinn or jinni, or something along those lines, or desert demons, demons of fallow areas and rural places. They believe in a great many superstitious things. And so it's all very real in the minds of people that are practicing such things. I fail to see any problem with it. I don't see any harm in these things. There's enough disaster and disease and chaos in the world, so I can't imagine that specifically tips things over the edge. And if it does, who cares? It's an interesting occult practice at the very least. That's about all. Peace out.